All right, so when you think about fighting poverty, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it food donations? Maybe building a well? For decades, that's pretty much been the playbook. But what if I told you we've kind of been looking at the whole problem wrong? What if poverty isn't just about a lack of stuff, but a denial of something way more fundamental, something like power? Well, that's exactly the powerful shift in thinking we're going to get into.
So it really boils down to these two completely different ways of seeing the world. On the left, you've got the traditional view: poverty is a needs-based problem. People lack things. The solution seems easy. Just give them the things. But on the right, you've got this radical new idea. Poverty is a rights-based issue. It's a denial of power. And that little tweak in perspective, well, it changes absolutely everything.
Okay, so to really get why this new idea is such a game changer, we first have to take a step back and look at the old way of doing things. This is the approach that really dominated the scene for most of the 20th century. It's usually called the welfare model, or the needs-based model.
I mean, the logic here is pretty straightforward, right? If people are hungry, you give them food. If they don't have clean water, you go build them a well. The thing is, in this model, people who are experiencing poverty are often treated just as objects of charity, as passive people just receiving help.
But, and this is a huge but, this model has some serious problems. It can end up creating a cycle of dependency, where communities start relying on outside help instead of building up their own strength. And what's really crucial here is that it almost never tackles the real reasons for poverty, the power imbalances, the injustices. It's basically like treating the symptoms of a sickness without ever actually diagnosing the disease.
So all this frustration with the old model started to bubble up, and it led to this massive shift, a real paradigm shift in the world of development. A brand new idea came along that just completely flips the script. It's called the rights-based approach, or you'll hear it called RBA for short. And here is the absolute core idea. The RBA says that having enough food to eat, or a decent education, or access to healthcare, that isn't a gift. It's not a charitable handout. It is a fundamental human right. And that single change reframes the entire conversation, from one about charity to one about justice and obligation.
So, in the language of the RBA, we are all rights holders. Every single person on this planet is entitled to a core set of rights just because they're human. This isn't some gift from a government, it's a legal entitlement, and it's backed up by international law.
Now, for the other side of that coin, if you have rights holders, then you also have to have duty bearers. These are the institutions, the groups that have the legal and moral duty to respect, protect, and fulfill those rights. The number one duty bearer is the state, the government. But it also includes others, like aid organizations and local authorities. And what this does is create a direct, clear line of accountability. Now, you might be thinking this all sounds a little abstract, a little philosophical. But it's not. It's actually a really practical framework for taking action. And a great way to understand how it works on the ground is through a simple acronym, PANEL. Let's break it down. Okay, let's walk through this. It starts with P for participation. People are involved. They're active partners, not just sitting on the sidelines. That leads to A for accountability. Those duty bearers can now be held responsible if they don't deliver. At the heart of it is N for non-discrimination, making sure the most vulnerable people are prioritized. All of this builds toward E for empowerment, giving people the know-how and the tools to claim their own rights. And the foundation holding it all up? L for legality. This whole thing is based on actual law. You can see how all these pieces click together to create real change.
So that's the theory. Sounds pretty good on paper, right? But what does this actually look like in the real world? How does this idea jump off the page and make a tangible difference in people's lives?
At its very heart, the rights-based approach is all about transformation. It's about what happens when people go from being passive recipients of aid to being active citizens, agents of their own change who are empowered to demand that their governments actually do their jobs. Let me tell you about Jessica, a 14-year-old in Colombia. After being forced from her home by conflict, she learned about her rights to things like education and healthcare. And instead of just waiting for someone to help, she and her friends actually marched in the capital, Bogota, to lobby the government themselves. This quote just says it all, doesn't it? It captures that deep psychological shift from feeling helpless to feeling hopeful, from being a recipient to being an agent of change. And here is a fantastic example of accountability in action. In India, a man found out his name had been just mysteriously removed from the government's below poverty line list. So what did he do? He used this incredible legal tool called the Right to Information Act, and he filed a simple request asking, hey, why? And what the information revealed was corruption. Someone wealthier had paid a bribe to take his spot. Faced with that hard evidence, the authorities had no choice but to put his name back on the list. Now that is empowerment through legality. Look, this isn't just about a few small, isolated projects. The rights-based approach represents a huge shift in thinking at the very highest levels of global development. Now, this change didn't happen overnight. You could say the seeds were planted way back in 1948 with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But a real turning point came in 1993, when a UN conference officially connected the dots between human rights and development. By 2003, it was a done deal. All the major UN agencies had agreed on a common way to put this powerful idea into practice.
And this isn't some niche idea. Today, we're talking about the heavy hitters, huge global organizations like Oxfam and the United Nations Development Program. They've officially adopted the rights-based approach as a core principle that guides everything they do.
Okay, but let's be real for a second. Like any big, ambitious idea, the RBA isn't some kind of magic bullet. It faces some serious real-world challenges, and it definitely has its fair share of critics.
So some critics ask, is this just a change in words? Are we just rebranding old programs with new buzzwords without anything actually changing on the ground? Others point out that it can be incredibly complicated to actually do and to measure. I mean, proving that empowerment has gone up is a lot harder than just counting how many bags of food you delivered.
But even with those challenges, that fundamental shift in mindset is just undeniable. It's a move from a model of charity, which is a gift, sure, but can create dependency and only treats symptoms, to a model of dignity. And this is all about a right that builds empowerment and, maybe most importantly, gets to the real root causes of poverty. So if you take just one thing away from this whole explainer, let it be this. It all boils down to a simple but really profound change in the question we're asking. We stop asking, what do people need? And we start asking, what are people entitled to as a human right? And whose job is it to make sure they get it?
And that leaves us with one last powerful question to think about. If we accept that extreme poverty isn't just a misfortune, but an actual violation of fundamental human rights, what does that make our duty? Not just for governments or big organizations, but for each one of us. Something to think about.